Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Perspective Podcast, where we explore new thoughts, connect ideas, and offer perspectives that may change the way you think about a thing or two. And today, we're going to talk about priority. So, I was having a talk with my brother, who was gracious enough to be the first candidate for something I'm doing on Instagram Live now called Reality Chat, where I just pick some person I know that I like to talk to, or somebody comes up to me with a good idea. We have a concept, and then we just talk live about it, and then people could watch us so that it can inspire some thought. It's not just me talking to myself like on these podcasts, and maybe I get to learn something because I have somebody kind of shooting my ideas down. But we were talking before that about truth and logic, and how that doesn't always come into play when people are acting out their lives. And it was really strange. It was like surreal, where somewhere in that talk, it dawned on me that for me, the way that I've been raised and the way that I think, there's certain things that are like always present in my decision-making process, at least I think, or like very important. And the truth, my morals, I just said some other thing, but like being like legal, like these kind of things are in my mind or on my mind as I'm making every decision that I make. And we were kind of talking about like, why do people make decisions that seem to not take these into account? And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think truth is mandatory. I think it's like, it only even comes into somebody's mind when they put it there. And there's times where like you can think, is this right or is this wrong? And somebody could like steal an apple or something like that. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was wrong. How could you do that? But in that person's mind, when they stole the apple, like the concept of right and wrong was like nowhere to be found in their mind. The concept that was in their mind was, I'm hungry. And it was like satisfy hunger, survive. And as we started talking about this more, really what came out of that conversation was that the motivations that people use to conduct their lives are kind of their priorities for decision making. And people, to a certain extent, get to choose what's important to them. And based on what's important to them, their priorities kind of manifest. And then their decision making process kind of comes from what's important to them. And if the truth is not important to them, or not, let's say not important, I think a better way to say it, if there are other things to them that are more important than the truth, then the truth may, he took a ticket, he's waiting in the lobby, or he or she or they is waiting in the lobby, and maybe the thing happens before their number ever gets called. And so it's like something is only important if it is a priority. And I'm going to talk today about like kind of the ideals in your mind that affect your decision-making process. But I think the whole idea of a priority is like something that is important, and it can be my kids are a priority. It can be my work is a priority. But in right now, I'm going to talk about things like truth, morality, empathy, beauty, honesty, and like ideas more typically that I think are affecting our decision-making process, maybe not upfront in a conscious way, but it's something that we're concerned with that's causing us to kind of filter the way that we navigate through life. And so I don't think that any value or any rule is mandated. It's forced upon people. I think like a lot of times outside forces like the media or your parents or your religion or me, if you listen to all my podcasts, maybe I'm influential. Yeah. Who knew? But I think there are a lot of outside forces that are pressuring you in order to have your priorities align with theirs. But at the end of the day, you get to choose what your priorities are, and they can be a myriad of different things. And the most important concepts or identifiers inside someone's head become their motivation for action or their priorities. And so some examples of most important are maybe being honest is like important to some people, but maybe being beautiful is important to me. And the decisions that I make in my everyday life support me becoming or maintaining my beauty. And so to somebody else whose priority is honesty or frugality, like my decisions may not make any sense to them because they're kind of judging me through their priorities. But if they looked at my decisions like, okay, what if beauty or my personal beauty, like being beautiful, was the most important thing to me? How would I act in this situation? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I might get into an abusive relationship if it supports the concept of me being beautiful, or being young, or being powerful, or being right. Sometimes people put themselves into really interesting situations to allow themselves to keep this idea of them being right. And it can involve lying, it can involve cheating, it can involve doing all these things, but those, like the telling the truth, may not be as important as being right. There's something called I'm probably going to butcher this, but there's like a hierarchy of needs chart. I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs chart, and there's like some stuff in there. I kind of forgot most of it, but it's saying like there's basic needs that people worry about, and people will not worry about things that are higher up on the chart until the lower ones are not worries for them anymore. And so like the things on the chart are like food and water and safety and shelter and stuff like that. And like and then the top one is like self-actualization, and it's like self-improvement and reading books and philosophy and stuff. But it's like nobody's going to worry about philosophy if they're hungry. Nobody's going to worry about philosophy if they think that their life is in danger. They're going to like, there's certain things that may be kind of like mandated priorities, to kind of bounce back and slap myself in the face, and like, because I said that wasn't a thing in the beginning. But there's like basic survival things that I think are kind of intrinsically within most humans to be priorities. And once you have those things, like once I know I have a place to live, once I know I have food and I'm not worried that might be taken away from me easily, then I can worry about the next higher thing. And I'm bringing this up because even trying to empathize with somebody by saying like, okay, I prioritize truth. I value truth very highly. This person values beauty. Let me try and walk a mile in their shoes and see what they're thinking. Maybe I can empathize with them. Even that still has kind of a twinge of judgment because, or I think it has a twinge of judgment because priorities, they're not like rigidly formed. They switch places all the time. And I think for like two main reasons. One, I think your priorities change over time as you grow and you learn new things and you have different experiences. Your priorities change, and that can be more like slow, like climate, like over time. But then also situationally, where kind of in this situation, this is important, but in that situation, this is important. At work, it's important to keep my job. And so I might be more obedient at work because keeping my job is like super important. But maybe at the park, it's not as important to be obedient because I don't feel like I'm going to lose my job because I don't work at the park. So maybe I'm more likely to give people a piece of my mind when I'm not at work because the priority of keeping my job doesn't exist there. And so the priorities shuffle depending on your different situations. So I think like when you try to judge someone, like how did they think that was okay to do, and then you're trying to get in their head and walk a mile in their shoes. It's possible that people own more than one pair of shoes, and they are switching off between shoes for different events, and trying to profile somebody too much can lead you to a bad place. But I'm trying to explain this concept of like priorities affecting the decision-making process as kind of like maybe a way for us to understand that not everybody values what we value, and if you believe something different, or if you value something different, it may take you down an extremely different decision path, and that's okay, even if it bothers me a lot, because I'm not the king of the world. I'm not like the emperor of the universe, so it's okay for me to be confused or annoyed by whatever you're doing, or it's okay for me to be happy with it. But I think sometimes it's less frustrating to understand that these people are not just making random decisions, or they're not just doing crazy stuff. In their mind, whatever way they got to it, they thought that was a good decision, and they're trying to make good decisions, but their definition of good, their definition of what's better, their definition of what's important may be different than yours. And so kind of like, let's understand each other and, try and not be too judgmental kind of thing. But I think whatever you come to think about this, I'm just trying to explain the concept. I'm not trying to tell you how to think. I'm just saying, this is an interesting thing I thought of. This idea that your priorities affect your decision-making process is like a second-degree like force mechanism for causing you to make decisions, because this is something that you don't typically come up with at the instant you make the decision. It's something that you've been working on over time. And even though you might flip-flop your shoes from different situations, you might like, in this situation I act this way, in this situation I act that way. Like, you set those values over time, like climate, like slowly as you grew and learned, even though you might be, like, you bought your shoes over time. You didn't just buy 1,000 pairs of shoes right now and you're like randomly flapping between shoes. And sometimes, you catch someone when they're at the shoe store trying on shoes, and that can be like hard to deal with. But most of the time, we have our values, we grow our values, and we change our values slowly over time, and these end up affecting our decision making in the moment. And so this is like second degree, because I kind of like took my time before, and what I did before affects now. And so some of the implications of this, I'm going to bring virtues and vices into the conversation. That was something that was like really big in 5th grade. I remember we used to like read like the virtue of the week and its matching opposite, the vice. Oh, children, what is you think of truth? What's the opposite of truth? Lying! Very good, children. It was very interesting. But your virtues and your vices, your things that are important and your things that are not important, like these are all subjective things. And one of the things I'm trying to kind of emphasize in this conversation is the subjectivity of what you think is better is your opinion, and somebody else's opinion might be different. And so something that you think is a virtue, someone else might think is a vice, and vice versa. So in terms of them acting well or them being good people, to them, they might think they're being good, or they might not even understand why you think this is a bad thing, because to them, from where they're from, with their culture, whatever, this is something that you kind of get rewarded for. This is something that people say, hey, that's good, keep doing that. And so the way that things can like flip-flop from different perspectives can be very interesting. And what I thought was the most profound thing to me was I thought there were some certain things off of the Maslow chart, like not associated with eating and sleeping and being safe, that were like kind of on everybody's mind, but is not always on everybody's mind. So concepts like truth or belief, like whatever you're thinking is so, like, how could you do this? in your mind, you might be basing that off something that's important to you, but the thing that's important to you may have never crossed the mind of the person that made the decision because they have different priorities. And it's like, to me, it's such like a mind-blowing concept that you're like, I'm so fixated on how you could lie or cheat someone like that or throw a baby in a garbage can or whatever. And the person that's doing the act, they're in a totally different thought space, and they're not even considering what you're talking about. And if you took the time to talk to them, maybe you'd be like, wow, yeah, okay, I may not agree, but I can see where you're coming from. And it's not always the best to force people to explain their motives, but hypothetically or theoretically, the idea of giving someone the benefit of the doubt that they're doing something that they think is good. And this can get a little tricky because like any good superhero movie, usually the villain thinks they're doing good. Usually the villain has like opposite priorities, and what they're doing they think is a good thing, and then the good people are like, but it's such a bad thing, but I can see how you took that path, and that's what makes a really good movie when your villain is more of an, I think it's called an anti-hero, but I've never looked that word up. I just assumed that that's what that meant. That kind of idea where you're able to see the person, and you're able to respect the person as a person, even if they're making decisions that are crazy to you, because you are taking the effort to not throw all your priorities all over them and say, look at me, I have come to the greatest zenith, the high pinnacle of what is good to care about, and you better do what I do. You're not doing that. You're saying, well, what do you care about, and why are you making these decisions, rather than saying you're wrong because you don't fit into my box. And so there's some interesting situations that may come up, like someone may lie if they think in that moment safety is more important than telling the truth. And I might do that too. But typically, I probably wouldn't lie because I don't like lying. And so in terms of situations changing a thing. But if somebody like is in a situation that you think is safe, but they don't think is safe, then they might lie. And you may be like, why'd you lie? And it's hard to convince you that they lied because they weren't safe because you thought the situation was safe. But maybe you're like a dude, and maybe they're like a little girl or something like that, and they didn't think it was safe. And then another situation is someone may kill somebody if loyalty is way more important to them than like following the law. So there's lots of different ways you can talk about this, but I think it's very interesting to actually talk about. Like, yes, listening to me is very interesting, but if you talk to somebody about this concept, it starts, like, I think when you say it out loud and when you participate and you raise your hand and you have to think and get challenged by other people, it really gets your mind working, and it really starts being incorporated into who you are. It's not just something you heard on YouTube once. And so, like, especially I think with this concept, because everybody has this, everybody has their priorities, and everybody else has different priorities. Even if they were the person that raised you, or if they're your twin brother, everybody's a little bit different. And so by talking to other people about this concept, I think it helps you improve your ability to empathize. And even sometimes empathy is something that happens because you're aware of the other situation, not necessarily because you're like some God level empathizer. But like you were not able to empathize because you didn't know or you were not aware. But now that you are aware of the situation, your ability to empathize is way higher. And you may not condone, you may not agree with it, but understanding, I think, helps bring together communities. It helps lower frustrations, and it makes for more interesting conversations. So that's my little spiel on priority for today. And I'm excited. I know I said it in the last podcast, but I finally got a website going, and it's myname.com, jordantremaine.com, which is so like, pride moment. But go there, check it out. It has my podcast on there. It has, I put a YouTube channel up because I record certain things, and if I recorded something like a live session, it'll be on there. And And if I have events, all the events for all my stuff, all the community discussions, the real talk things, like I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast, the real talk sessions are on there, the workshops are on there, and then like the podcast and anything I'm doing special wise. And it's also kind of a landing page for everything, so you don't have to be going to like Meetup or Facebook and Instagram and like pulling all these things together from the different sites. It's, if you want to know something, it's there. It has a history of like the past events if you want to see certain concepts we come up with. And I've been toying around with the idea of making a blog, but I'm not sure because that involves work. And yeah, that's where I'm at with that. But head on down to jordantremaine.com if you hadn't already. Check it out. And you can even subscribe to a newsletter, because if I ever feel like telling people stuff, I'll probably use that as a medium. So you can go ahead and do that, because there's a little button on the template that I use to make the site. So yeah, this is about priority. Like, I'll never stop preaching. Please go talk to somebody about this. Please tell somebody about this, because I think this is something that can lower a lot of frustration, and it can help people to people with each other better. And I think that whatever I can do to help the community be more of a community, I'm going to do that. And this is what I think I'm good at, so I'm going to do this until I find something that's better suited for that. But I really want a place where people can think openly, not feel judged, not feel the need to be politically correct, and not feel like they're going to get attacked for thinking what they think. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to bring different thoughts to the table, but I think there should be spaces where you can think openly, like a think tank. I think that's what those are for, but for the public. So I'm trying to create those spaces. Head down to jordantremaine.com if you want to see some of those spaces and go to some of those spaces. But yeah, I will see you guys later. Please share your thoughts with me if you had some interesting thoughts about priority from listening to this podcast. And I will catch you guys next time. All right, bye.